I would say I'm more confident that there's going to be a 10-2 SEC team that is not in the college football playoff. College football has never been better. Interest has never been higher. I believe that we are at the dawn of the golden age of college football. It was an epic day of college football. It was one of those days where you fall in love with the sport all over again. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Joel Klatt Show. I am Joel Klatt. This show is always brought to you by Hampton by Hilton, and we thank you for your support over there, Hampton by Hilton. Hey, remember, wherever you're listening to this show, rate and review us if you would. That would be awesome. If you're on YouTube, that would also be awesome. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click that notifications button, and you can get our content whenever it comes out. Remember, we still have that behind the broadcast video out there on YouTube. That was a YouTube exclusive, and really fired up about that. It's a good product. They followed us around for the Wisconsin-Alabama game earlier this year, and so you're going to want to check that one out. Leave us a comment below as well. And then if you're on social media, we're there as well at Joel Klatt Show. I'm on social media. You can find me personally on Twitter or X at Joel Klatt. Been a fun couple of days on Twitter, hasn't it, folks? Oh, my goodness. I hear you. Listen, fans, I hear you. I hear you. Just trying to explain kind of the ins and outs. All right, let's move on. The rankings are out. This is our second edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings. These are always interesting to get, and in particular, this version of the rankings, because they were vastly different in the way that they analyzed some of the same teams now week to week. So here we are. We've got our second edition, and this is what they gave us. Here's the top 25, according to the College Football Playoff Committee. Tulane, they get in there. Army is in there. Mizzou at 23, which, by the way, Eli Drinkowitz, you're not playing playoff games, brother. Sorry. I'm just sorry. Everyone thinks I'm just trying to take off on Missouri. It's just not the case, but they are not in a position to go to the college football playoff as an at-large team, and that ranking suggests it at number 23. You've got Colorado in there at 17, Kansas State at 16. It's very interesting there from the 15th spot in, because Texas A&M is sitting there. SMU, clearly the committee doesn't think all that highly about SMU. Boise poised at 13. They win, and they're going to be a group of 5 representative in there. Then Georgia at 12. And that's obviously interesting because they would be on the outside looking in, the way that the bracket is formulated. Ole Miss at 11, Bama 10, Miami at 9, Notre Dame 8, Tennessee 7, BYU 6, and then it's Indiana 5, Penn State 4, Texas 3, Ohio State 2, Oregon 1. So 4 Big Ten teams right inside the top 5 there, as Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, all in the top 5. Okay, let's get to just major takeaways now. Here's what we're thinking right now, right here at the Joel Klatt Show. I immediately saw a vast difference between last week and this week in the way that the committee is viewing and ranking Indiana and BYU. Now, that was a big source of contention on this program and others, by the way, last week in terms of the way that the committee was viewing or more so undervaluing Indiana and BYU. Now they jump way up. So each of them jump way up, each of them up 3 spots. And what I found so fascinating is that you can make a very strong argument that each of those teams jumped up 3 spots on the heels of probably the worst performance that they've had all year long. Indiana against Michigan in the second half did not look like Indiana from any other game. And BYU Utah, that was an incredible game that BYU was so fortunate to win. They get the penalty on the 4th down, then they're able to drive down. They get the field goal inside of 5 seconds. Utah felt like they had that game won. And so here's these 2 teams that play, I think, the worst game that they have played to date this season, and yet the playoff committee rewards them, moving them each up 3 spots. I just found that fascinating, and to me, it was a little bit of a human movement, because I felt like that committee heard what people were saying, and they reacted to what the sentiment was around Indiana and BYU last week after the first edition of the playoff rankings. So now when I look at those 2 teams, You see, last week I thought to myself, I don't know if they can lose one game. Even if it's BYU in the conference title game at 12-1, after last week's rankings, I didn't love their position. Same with Indiana. Let's say that for sake of argument that they lose a game that they will be underdogs in on the road at Ohio State and they finish 11-1. After last week, I was like, I don't know. That's a bubble team. Now it looks like those teams are safe. So the committee is going to do one of two things here moving forward. Either they have adjusted and this will be the new norm, or we're going to see wild fluctuations every single week. If we see wild fluctuations every single week, then the point would be nobody is safe, because you can go all the way down 9 spots like Georgia did after a loss to Ole Miss, or you can raise up 3 spots after your worst performance. So if they're going to be volatile, then nobody is safe. And you can't just say, well, we control our own destiny for an at-large spot, so on and so forth. Now, if they are just adjusting and they're trying to settle on a new normal, then what you would take from this iteration of these playoff rankings is that Indiana and BYU could probably lose a game and still go to the college football playoff. Yes, even BYU. Now, that would likely have to be in the Big 12 championship game, because that would help their stakes. They would be a 12-1 team at that point. If that were the case, would they probably still go? I think that they would. And now with Indiana at 5, you certainly see a scenario where even if they lost a game on the road as an underdog to Ohio State, that they would probably still go. So Curt Cignetti's crew is now 10-0. Their best wins are against Washington and Michigan. Both of those games were at home. Their strength of schedule is still in the 100s. It's actually dead at 100, but they still have the second-ranked scoring offense. They've still been beating people by quite a margin until this week against Michigan. So they, to me, are a fascinating watch in these playoff rankings. And the way that they played and being given the benefit of the doubt by this committee, I thought was my biggest takeaway. Both of those. The two non-blue blood brands got elevated 3 spots each after their worst performances. I would just hang real quickly before my next point, because the team right above them in Penn State, they move up 2 spots. Now they're 4th. They're 8-1. They do not have much left on that schedule. I feel really good about Penn State going to the playoff, and where they sit now after 2 playoff rankings, I really feel good about them hosting a college football playoff game. We've speculated about that all the way back to the summer. And now, like, I'm feeling very confident about that. And boy, wouldn't you love to see a playoff game in Happy Valley? I would sure love to see that, because their home field advantage has obviously been so good for a long time. It's one of the best environments in college football, if not the best in some instances. And for them to host, that would be a huge deal, in particular if they had to welcome an SEC team into their stadium. So that would be something that's very interesting. Okay, number 2 point that I would say just kind of jumped off of these rankings for me is that I look down and I'm like, okay, yeah, like Ole Miss is ahead of Georgia, but Georgia at 12, losses to Alabama, to Ole Miss. Texas is way up there. There's Tennessee at 7. Georgia's playing for their life this weekend. Georgia is playing for their life this weekend against Tennessee. They're 7-2. Their best win is obvious. It's on the road against number 3 Texas. That's a great win. They beat Clemson in the neutral site game to open the year. Their strength of schedule is number 1 in the country. The fact that they've had to play all of those teams in the SEC above them and still have one to go. They've had to play Texas. They've had to play Alabama. They've had to play Ole Miss, and now they have to play Tennessee. It's wild. They're going to have to go play those teams all on the road except for Tennessee. You have to play, and we knew this before the year, but now that it's played out, that is wild that their schedule has played out like that. It's wild. Now, I think that they're playing for their lives. Pending some craziness that happens, there is a scenario where Georgia as a 9-3 could still get in. I think that they're the only ones, though, because of that schedule. Other teams are not going to have that opportunity. If you were to ask me, what am I more confident in? A 10-2 SEC team not making it, or Georgia as a 9-3 being able to be in the playoff. I would say I'm more confident that there's going to be a 10-2 SEC team that is not in the college football playoff. That's my gut right now, the way that these rankings have come out. This is not a good situation for Tennessee, because anytime that Kirby Smart can use this like us against the world mentality, nobody believes in us mentality, he's going to use that, and that's when his team plays their best. We've seen that time and time again. He used it in the game at Texas. That's easily their best performance of the year, most complete performance of the year. Do I still have concerns about their offense? Yes. I am very concerned about their offense, in particular facing that Tennessee defense, which is an incredible defense, maybe the best in their conference. But Georgia's placement right there at 12, that one jumped out to me. What next? Okay, what are the other things that jumped out? Miami, first, I would just say I was pretty surprised that Miami was ahead of Bama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. I would not have done that. And the committee did. That Miami team has been perilously close to a loss for a few weeks now against some average teams. And they finally take that loss. And so now Miami's resume is a 9-1 team. Their best wins are against Louisville and Duke. Their strength of schedule is 39th, and they're 1-0 against the top 25. So it's not bad. It's not bad. I just don't love where they're at if they were to lose again. And here's the thing. If they lose in the regular season, there's a good chance that they don't get to the ACC championship game. Clemson might get into that spot, because remember, Clemson's last ACC game is actually this weekend against Pitt. So if they win, then Miami cannot stub their toe, or else Clemson would go to the ACC championship game. So they can't lose in the regular season, Miami. And then even if they were to lose in the ACC championship game, like, I don't love their argument, as in that case, like an 11-2 over some of those SEC teams, in particular a Georgia with the schedule that they've played, right? So Miami is kind of in a situation where their backs are against the wall. I believe that Miami is going to have to win out in order to go to the playoff. A loss at any moment is going to prevent them from being in this college football playoff. A loss before the end of the regular season keeps them out of the ACC championship game, and a loss in the ACC championship game elevates probably SMU into the playoff. Now they're going to have to win an argument against a 10-2 SEC team, and I don't think that they win that argument. I just really don't. Not with the schedule they've played, and not with some of the games that they've won in really close fashion, and against, let's call them not great teams. Cal comes to mind. Virginia Tech comes to mind, in particular in the way that they won those games. That's why I was surprised they are ahead of those SEC teams. I was pretty surprised by that. And then the last takeaway for me is just going to be like, the Big Ten looks like they have the inside track, if not just a sheer lock on at least 4 spots, with those teams all in the top 5 at this point. Obviously, Indiana and Ohio State still have to play. Oregon, they continue to win, and they're going to be in the Big Ten championship game, and that will put them into the college football playoff. And Penn State really doesn't have much left on that schedule, in particular for a team and a program under James Franklin that does not lose to unranked teams. That's just not something that they do anymore. Now, do they lose some of the big games? Yes. Michigan in previous years, Ohio State this year. Yes, they have, but they don't lose unranked games. So you wouldn't assume that would start now. So the Big Ten looks like they're in a really good position to get 4, because even if Indiana were to lose in Columbus, I do think that they would stay within those top 11 teams, and that they would probably get a spot, which means that you've got those 4 teams. I think that the ACC and the Big 12 probably are only going to get 1 team based on these rankings tonight. I don't think you're going to get Miami and SMU. I don't think that you're probably not going to get a Colorado and BYU if Colorado were to win. So what would it look like? Well, here's the bracket. Here's the bracket as it would lay out as what they gave us tonight. 1 would be Oregon, 2 Texas, 3 BYU, 4 Miami. That 5 spot becomes, I think, a really great spot, because 5 spot would be Ohio State. They would play the 12 seed Boise in Columbus. The 6th seed then would be Penn State, and they would host Ole Miss. That would be a great game. Ole Miss in Happy Valley. The 7 seed would be Indiana, and they would host Alabama. I'm sorry, that sounds awesome. Anybody else want to see that? I would love to see that. And then the 8-9 game would be Notre Dame having to go to Tennessee and play in Knoxville. That would be a great playoff. Now, what you see in this bracket that is a bit jarring is that Georgia would be on the outside looking in. Okay, so this is why I maintain that if you start getting status quo up here, I think Georgia's got to beat Tennessee. I think Georgia has to beat Tennessee. Then you start getting into a bunch of those SECs on the bubble, and you've got a huge debate at that point. But this Georgia team is up against it this weekend. That is easily one of my biggest takeaways. This Indiana BYU thing is not going away. They could probably both lose a game, maybe less so BYU, but certainly Indiana with where they're sitting at in the top 5 of these playoff rankings. But I just look at that playoff, man, and I'm like, I can't wait for this. I really can't. And by the way, one of those playoff games on one of those days is going to kick off at noon. I couldn't stop myself. Listen, folks, I want you to know something. I love this sport. I really do. I don't love it more than my family. I don't love it more than my Lord and Savior, but I love college football. And I am so thankful that all of you are as passionate as you are about this sport. I really am. And so I want you to know that everywhere I go and everywhere that I get an opportunity to call a game, you're getting everything from me every single week because you deserve it. Because college football fans are freaking awesome. Love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow with picks and previews. We've got a great week of a slate of games here. I'm headed to Colorado, and yes, we're kicking that at 10 a.m. So, Ohio State fans, think about 2 hours earlier. Maybe just think about that. Colorado is going to host Utah. Big Noon Kickoff is going to be there. Big Noon Saturday is going to be there. And I cannot wait to showcase those two teams and programs and some of those players as well, including Travis Hunter, the unicorn, who I think is probably going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Again, thank you for listening to this show. Thank you for watching this show. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. Rate and review us wherever you're listening. Follow us on social at Joel Klatt Show. Have a blessed week. We'll be back tomorrow.